Hey, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp. It's wonderful to be with you. I want to give a shout out to my patrons. Thank you very much. It really helps. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. If you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp and you can give whatever you feel led to give. So thank you. Appreciate it. I got a new microphone as a result of that. I got some fancy lights. They're kind of these digital things. They're kind of cool. And I upgraded the internet. So hopefully we're going to have a better experience. But if we don't, blame Comcast. I don't know. I don't know what to do. So we have some questions. Let's take these questions. These look awesome. Let's start over already with Herco Terco. He says, Ezekiel 47:11 says, but the miry places thereof and the mirishes thereof shall not be healed. They shall be given to salt. Why do these places remain unhealed on the new earth? Man, you got me. I do not know why those are going to remain undone. But tell you what, why don't we go to the text? I think that's always the better option. And what's interesting is that we do know, I do know this, we do know that there are places that are designated for, Gehenna, essentially. I don't know if there's a better way to put that, but let's go there to Ezekiel 47:11. Okay, so here's this river. The water flows toward the eastern region, goes down into the valley, and enters the sea. When it reaches the sea, its waters are healed. And it shall be that everywhere that every living thing that moves wherever the rivers, interesting, notice that, rivers, okay, so that it now starts making some different branches of this thing, will live. There will be a very great multitude of fish because these waters go there, for they will be healed, and everything will live wherever the river goes. Now it's back to singular. So it starts, here's how I see this. I see this river coming from the New Jerusalem, right? It's coming out from under God's throne. And then it goes out to these different places. And some of them go down to the Salt Sea. And so that is, at least part of that is going to be healed. It should be that fishermen will stand on it from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. They will be for places for spreading their nets. Their fish will be of the same kinds of the fish as of the Great Sea, exceedingly many. But its swamps and marshes will not be healed. They will be given over to salt. All right, excellent question. Again, we're not told specifically why it's going to remain this way. However, if we go to Isaiah chapter 66, verse 21, actually verse 24, so it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me. They should go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm does not die and their fire is not quenched. They shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. This place is known as Gehenna. Jesus spoke about this place when he said that it's better to enter into life maimed than to go, with all your appendages into Gehenna. And then he quotes right here, the worm does not die, the fire is not quenched. He's quoting from this place. What's also interesting, there's so many pieces to this puzzle, guys. It's really amazing stuff. So Ezekiel chapter 39, this, of course, is about Gog and Magog. All right. Now, I'm writing a new book. It's Corrupting the Image 3. I've already got 2 done. In fact, it's ready for pre-sale. I should let you guys know that. It's ready for pre-sale. Should be coming out April 8th. Is what I'm expecting it to finally be out. But you can get the pre-sale. It's on my Amazon channel or Amazon page if you want to go there. I'll see if I can. I don't know if I can dig up the links right now. But anyway, I digress. So Gog, I'm going to be talking about what is the meaning of Gog in Corrupting the Image 3. It's amazing stuff. It's from Sumerian. Anyway, this guy. Notice it says, it'll come to pass in that day that I'll give Gog a burial place there in Israel, in the valley of those who pass by east of the sea. So here we have another mention of the sea. That's presumably the Salt Sea, somewhere in there, right? The Dead Sea, as it were. and it will obstruct travelers. Interesting. It's going to obstruct travelers. Well, what did we just see in Isaiah 66:24? That as people are coming up to worship the Lord, they're going to look upon the corpses of the men who transgressed against him. So as they're going to see Yehovah, there's this obstruction, this valley close to the sea. Exactly where this is challenging, because the topography and or geography is going to change to some extent. So I don't know that we can put our finger right on where this is, but it's interesting. We talk about Gehenna, right? That is Ge Ben Hinnom. That's the valley of the son of Hinnom. We know where that is. So I'm persuaded it's going to change its locale a little bit, because you got the city coming down, all kinds of pretty crazy stuff is going to happen. So things are going to change to some extent, but there will still be this place known as Gehenna. This seems to be the valley, and it's related to the sea. And this valley is going to also be known as the valley of Hamon Gog. All right, so Hamon means a lot. So the hordes, basically, the valley of the hordes of Gog is what this is going to be. And so these seem to be a different place, the same place. So it could be, I'm speculating here, but it could be that per your question in Ezekiel 47:11, that these areas that are left to marshes may be related to this valley of Hamon Gog. That's my theory. Okay, I don't know that to be true, but I just put some of the pieces together. That's what I would suggest. All right, thank you for that, Herko. Let's go to Senepke 101. Are there any other historical sources to your knowledge with more info on the Urim and Thummim? Simple answer, not that I know of. So I'm sorry, I wish there were. Yeah, I just can't think of any. There's none that I know of. Doesn't mean there aren't any others. There may be. There just may be stuff that I am ignorant about. So I'm sorry I don't have the answer to that, but thank you for the great question. All right, this is from Ed Doss. Do you have any advice for those discovering Torah and how to handle the vitriol that comes from their Christian brothers and sisters that call them heretics? Wow, that's a fun one, Ed. Well, first of all, and I think you already know this, Ed, but I think the first thing to do is to not be a Torah terrorist, right? So what's a Torah terrorist? That's when you discover that I didn't know we were supposed to keep Sabbath. Why didn't they tell us, whoever they are? Why didn't they tell us? And then you start going out feeling like you have to convince everybody and correct everybody, like you're not doing it right? So, I'd say that's probably the first thing to do when you discover Torah. And, remain very, very humble. And kind of the foundation of that whole idea, because I've had people say, well, truth is important. And I agree that truth is important. But think about this. God was patient with you, right? He was very, very patient with you. He's been patient with me. And he was patient enough to allow me to discover the things that I've discovered. Now, should I not show that same patience with others? Isn't this exactly what Jesus was talking about, the parable of the man who owed like 10,000 talents? And he said to his master, have mercy upon me. And so his master was filled with pity and forgave him the debt. And then he goes out, this man who's been forgiven of his debt, and he goes and he starts beating up on his, the people that owe him, right? His debtors. And he says, pay up or else. And I'm going to, master. And then he throws him in jail. Right. And of course, you guys know the story, right? And Jesus' whole point is that, look, if you've been forgiven, you need to forgive. Same principle, that God has been so gracious and patient with us that we need to share that with others. And unfortunately, it's going to happen when There are people who have grown up with traditions. They've grown up with ideas that they hold to be sacred, and they often do those out of ignorance. I've held various doctrines out of ignorance. I thought they were true. For example, the timing of the pre-trib rapture. I thought that was absolutely true. I heard about it since I was a little boy. And, I had a few proof texts here and there, and, it made sense. But when I really dug into it, I'm like, wait, there's nothing here. This is the emperor's new clothes, right? There's just nothing here to substantiate this thing. And I was brokenhearted because I loved that doctrine. And it was not easy to let it go. So, I do my best. Okay, I'm not perfect, but I do my best to show the same kind of patience that God has shown to me. I try to show that to others. But of course, people that feel backed into a corner, feel like you are teaching something that is contrary to their worldview, they're going to respond like a cornered animal. And here's the deal. This is something I discovered, is when you start talking about politics and religion, you're not talking about some abstract, objective kind of truth. What you're doing is you're talking about a very subjective truth to people. I do believe there's objective truth, but one of my point here is that this is very personal, right? This is the worldview that somebody has. And so when you say, no, you're wrong on this particular topic, it's not that you just have this topic wrong, but you're saying you're attacking my whole character, right? That's what it feels like. When you attack, my political position or my theological position, you're not just disagreeing with an idea. You're disagreeing with me. You're questioning my value as a person. And I think that is the hardest thing for people to get over. So it's not just, well, here, just look at these facts and you should be fine, right? I've tried that, trust me, and it usually doesn't work with people because it's not about facts. It's about an emotion that they hold, and they're very, very vested in that emotion. And that's a sense of who they are, right? That's part of their worldview. That's part of their self-identity. And if you destroy that, you're destroying them. That's how it feels. So I think you just got to have a strong upper lip. When people call you heretics, I've been called heretic many times. But you know what? That's okay. Because what is a heretic? A heretic just means that that person is disagreeing with an official doctrine held by some group, right? So as far as the Catholics are concerned, I'm a heretic, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm not too concerned about what the Catholics think about me. But of course, when fellow evangelicals say that, then I'm a little more hurt. But what I realize also is that that's just one more area of pride that the Lord wants to correct in me. Because I keep thinking about, well, what do they think about me? And God's like, it really doesn't matter what others think about you. It matters what God thinks about you. And, sometimes I have things wrong, and people that disagree with me are correct in their position. And then I learn from that. But sometimes when I know that I read this in the Word of God, I'm going to stand on that no matter what. I don't care if they agree or disagree. This is what it says. It's right here. I've examined it. I've tested it. It's right here. Then you let the chips fall where they may. And just pray for them. I pray for a lot of those kind of people frequently, because if I don't, I might start getting bitter. And so, when I've been wounded by people that have, said things to me that were very, very hurtful, I have to just say, okay, Lord, bless that person. Whatever they need right now, wherever they are, where they're right, bless them in that, strengthen them. Where they're wrong, help them to see your truth, not mine, but your truth. And then I kind of pray for the same thing for myself. That's usually what I try to do. So I hope that helps, Ed. I know it's hard, but hang in there, brother. All right. This is another one from Herco Terco. What do you think the glorified body will be like, and how do we believe it will appear. Well, it's interesting that John says we do not yet know, what we shall be like. So we don't know entirely. We have glimpses of what that body is going to be like. So let's start with Matthew 13:43. That's an amazing passage. So the Son of Man will send out his angels. They'll gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, etc., cast them into the furnace of fire. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. All right, and so we have this same thing in Daniel 12:3. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. All right, so that gives us a glimpse as to what our bodies are going to be like. We're going to be bright. And I think that's pretty exciting, right? Especially for a lot of us who sometimes feel really dull. We're going to be bright. We're going to have a body that it's emitting light. We catch a glimpse of that when Moses came down from the mountain after he'd been up there for 40 days and nights with the Lord. It says that his skin was shining. It says karan or. All right, the word karan means to shine forth. It's interesting that the word karan is also for the horns, right? And so if you've ever been to Italy, there's an incredible statue by Michelangelo of Moses, and he has horns, okay? So he has those because the Latin misunderstood that word. And I understand why they did, because it's they just didn't have the linguistic, knowledge that we have today. They didn't have all that back then. And so they mistook that word for horns. But anyway, you have the image here of Moses coming down the mountain and his face is shining. That is just a picture of what our bodies are going to be like. We're going to be shining light. We're going to be like the angels. Jesus says that in Luke 21, that was it Luke 20? I think it's Luke 20. Let's take a look over there. So we can, I think it's Luke 20. So this is where the Sadducees are asking Jesus, right? So the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. Jesus says, but those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor given in marriage, for they nor can they die anymore, for they were equal to the angels. All right, so we're gonna be equal to the angels. That means what their bodies are like, ours will be similar. I don't know if they'll be exactly the same, but it says equal to the angels. So there you go, something like that. And our sons of God being sons of the resurrection. So those are just a few of the glimpses that we're going to experience in the age to come. I'm looking forward to that new body. Man, the older you get, the more you look forward to that new body. It's going to be great. All right, follow-up question. What age will people be in the resurrection? The same age you are, today plus however many years, right? Your age won't change. What you're asking is, what will people look like, right? You're asking, will they look like they're 26, right? People will be as old as they are, right? So Adam's going to be the oldest, right? He will be, right, 930 years plus one, starting when we all start, right? So we're going to keep those ages, but as far as how we look, whatever is the optimal, is it 26? Is it 27? I don't know. Somewhere in there probably will be what we look like. But the truth is, we're not told. We're not told. So we can only speculate on what apparent age we're going to have. All right. Thank you for that. K9 Centurion Kilo, Ezekiel 47:7. Is this talking about Yeshua? Let's take a look. Ezekiel 47. Okay, let's go back a couple verses. All right, so he said to me, son of man, have you seen this? So the angel is talking to Ezekiel. Then he brought me and returned me to the bank of the river. When I returned, there along the bank of the river, very many trees on one side and the other. Then he said to me, this water flows toward the eastern region, goes down into the valley and enters the sea. When it reaches the sea, its waters are healed. So I don't think that's talking about Jesus. I believe that it's talking to Ezekiel. The many trees on one side and the other are identical to what we see in Revelation 22, 1 and 2. He showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. All right, so we see that on both sides of the river, you have the tree of life. It's interesting that you have the tree of life, and yet which bore 12 fruits, each yielding its fruit every month. So it's not exactly clear. Is it one tree with many roots? That's kind of like how aspen trees are, that you have many trees that are coming out of one root system. So I'm guessing that the tree of life is going to be of a similar nature. It's just what I'm supposing. And then you'll have many sprouts coming up from both sides of the river. But I don't think that's talking about Yeshua. I really don't see that here in Ezekiel 47:7. All right. Very cool. Let's go to the next question. This is from J.D. Thomas. When does the wedding supper of the Lamb occur? Oh, man, you're going to get me in trouble. So when I was a pre-tribber, which I'm not anymore, but when I was a pre-tribber, I would have said that the moment we're raptured, then we have these 7 years of the tribulation, and the church is up in heaven enjoying, wedding nuptials with Jesus. And then at the end of that time, we're going to come back with Jesus and take care of planet Earth. I don't see it that way anymore, of course. I'm not a pre-tribber. And as part of this discovery for me is I've really seen this bigger picture. I think most of you know that I co-authored a book called Commonwealth Theology Essentials. And in that book, my co-authors and I are really arguing and doing our best to show the evidence that we are part of the Commonwealth of Israel. We're part of the Commonwealth of Israel. All right, so it's not that we replaced the Jews, but we're joining the Jews. We're not becoming Jewish, but we're joining, because there's two houses, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Jeremiah 31:31, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. So I believe I'm part of that. Paul talks extensively about the reunification of these two houses, which has been missed for a very long time because we've had various biases throughout the centuries. So as a result of that, the one bride, this really comes down to who's the bride. The bride is Israel. You don't believe me? Good. I'm going to prove it to you. Let's go over to Hosea chapter 1. All right. Hosea is of course, a first temple prophet. He's a prophet to the northern kingdom of Israel. All right. So the Lord came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go take for yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land has committed harlotry by departing from the Lord. So he goes and does this. And notice here, super important, verse 6, I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel. I will utterly take them away. Yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah. So there you go. No more mercy for Israel, but yes, mercy for Judah. And so then he names his kids, right? He says, call his first kid Lo Ruchama, right? No mercy. I'll have no mercy in the house of Israel. There he says, right? No mercy. Then he has another kid, Lo Ami, for you're not my people, and I will not be your God. So who is he talking to? Israel or Judah? Well, to Israel. He's talking to Israel, not to Judah, because he said, I will have mercy on the house of Judah, but no mercy for Israel. So this is kind of big stuff here. But then he says here, that's like, wait, you just told us they're not my people. And then he says, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it said to them, you are not my people, lo ami, right? There it shall be said to them, you are sons of the living God. Wow. I mean, this is huge stuff, right? This is amazing. But wait, there's more. So when we get to chapter 2, well, first of all, the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together. That's what we typically call the rapture. Okay, it's the gathering of these two houses. Now he goes on in chapter 2, bring charges against your mother, bring charges, for she's not my wife, nor am I her husband. So they were married. They're not married anymore. That's that. And then he goes on and he says, I did all these great things. You didn't care for me, etc. Thus says the Lord, they will call me my husband and no longer my master. So Ishi, my husband, no longer Baali, because I'm going to take the names of the Baals out of their mouths. They shall be remembered by their name no more. In that day, I'll make a covenant for them. And then he says, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice and loving kindness and mercy. So we who have believed in Yeshua are now part of this. I'm going to demonstrate this. Then I will sow her for myself in the earth, and I will have mercy on her who had not obtained mercy. Then I will say to those who are not my people, you are my people. And they shall say, you are my God. Now, guess who else said this very thing, right? Well, Paul quotes this. He quotes this in Romans chapter 9, that even us whom he called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. Notice here the word Gentiles. And who is he applying this to? As he says in Hosea, I will call them my people, who were not my people, and her beloved, who was not beloved. Well, there you go, right? That's it. Now, with the same thing as in 1 Peter. Peter says, you are a chosen race, is actually not generation, but chosen race, who once were not a people, but now are the people of God, who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. All right, so if you are a believer in Yeshua, you are part of the house of Israel. You're part of this thing. This is the commonwealth of Israel. Again, we're not replacing the Jews. It's not the church versus the Jews and they're separate entities, but they become one. They become one. This is the two sticks in Ezekiel 37 that God so desires to put back together. He wants to put them together so there'll be one nation. It will not be two nations ever again. All right, so that's the preamble to your question. All right, I'm getting there. All right, so when does the wedding supper of the Lamb occur? Well, who's the bride? It's the commonwealth of Israel, right? So the commonwealth of Israel, that includes all believers in Yeshua. And of course, God is doing things with the house of Judah, to be sure. I won't get into all those details, but he's doing things with the house of Judah. He's bringing us together. And the house of, both houses of Judah and Israel, but the leaders in Jerusalem will have to say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, for Jesus to come back. Jesus said that in Matthew 23. It says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, and he lists all the things that they've done. And then he says how he wanted to gather them as a mother hen gathers its chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Now your house is left you desolate. You will not see my face from now until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. And so when the leadership of Jerusalem make that declaration, Jesus will come back. And then the marriage supper of the Lamb will occur. So shortly after the return of Jesus, as I see it, this is going to happen in the fall. I think the return of Jesus when they call upon Jesus, that will happen on the Feast of Trumpets. Then there will be a period of 10 days of fighting where Jesus is literally fighting Satan and his forces. He has everything wrapped up, etc., by Yom Kippur. That's when the books are open. That is when he is going to judge the Antichrist and the false prophet. And that's when Satan will be put into the abyss for 1,000 years. And that is when the marriage supper of the Lamb begins, because then God dwells with his people, and the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, he's going to dwell with his people. And what does he say in Revelation? It's beautiful. Look at this language. This is in Revelation chapter 7. I think it's in verse 14. Not quite. Hold on. Okay. Verse 15. Therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. They shall neither thirst anymore, nor hunger anymore, nor thirst anymore. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of waters. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. This is language that has been used of the house of Israel and the house of Judah. He's going to bring them together. And then beginning with the Feast of Sukkot, that first year of the millennium, I would argue that is when the marriage supper begins, because God's going to be with his people. That's the consummation, if you will, of where now we become one with our husband. We become one with our God. It's going to be beautiful. I can hardly wait. All right. Thank you for that wonderful question. Thank you. That was very good. Let's now go to Dion Boss. Are men commanded to be the providers? What can you say about a wife who, about a wife is the one who will have a full-time job, but the husband only has a part-time job? Excellent question, Dion. So part of this really has to do with how the breadwinning has actually changed a lot over the years. So let's go to a passage I'm sure that you are familiar with, which is Proverbs 31. Here you have these incredible attributes of a godly woman. So he says here, all right, who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. All right, so she's worth a lot, okay? That's the first thing. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. This sounds like she is working full-time to me. She's like the merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night, provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it. From her profit she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hand holds the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet, etc. And she does all these amazing things. Now, sometimes, ladies have been a little bit intimidated like that. I can't do all those things. Well, of course not. No one woman could do all those different things. But these are the qualities of what women as a whole can do. And many women have many of those skills, not so much the distaff and the spindle anymore, because that's not really something we do. But notice that she goes out, she considers a field and she buys it. Right? She provides food for the household. She gets up early and she does all this stuff. She works, right? So, kind of translate those into modern day occupations. And you can see that this woman was working full time. Was it possible that she was making more money than her husband? Sure. Part of the challenge of understanding this is that people were not, clocking in 9 to 5 back then. They didn't have those kinds of jobs. And it wasn't always who had more money, but it was the household that had the money. So I don't think it's wrong that if I don't think it's wrong at all if a wife makes more money than the man. I would say this, though. Men, we are charged to work, right? We're not to be loafers. We're not to be idle. We're not to just, say, well, I'm going to let my wife do all the work and I'm just going to chill. No, don't be lazy. Get to work. Get out there. Hustle, right? Do what you need to do. But women, clearly, you have both a beautiful passage saying of what you're able to do, right? And kind of to some degree what is expected. Not all those things at once, of course, but these are what women can do. And so the point here is that it's to be a collective. Both are to work in their own ways. And if one happens to make more silver, right, because that's what they would have earned for their money. If one earns more silver, great. But maybe you're trading it. Maybe you got some sheep and you're trading those for some other thing. Okay, but industrious. Both are industrious in different ways, and they're both providing for the family. So for the question, are men commanded to be the provider? Well, certainly women have that role as well. Men are indeed told to take care of their families. Let's see, I'm thinking Paul says that if one does not take care of his family, he is worse than an infidel. And I'm trying to think where he says that. I'm forgetting. It's like in 2 Timothy or something like that. But a man is to provide for his family. So yes, he is to provide as well. But again, there can be this sharing of bringing in the money within the family. Hope that gave some clarity. Thanks so much. Thank you, Dion. All right, this is from JD. He asks, if the new Jerusalem is during the millennium, is there another resurrection judgment after the 1,000 years? Is that when the earth is destroyed by fire? 2 Peter 3:7, Revelation 21:1. All right, well, JD, I'll gladly admit that my perspective is the minority perspective, all right? So just so you understand that. I'm going to tell you how I see it, not how a lot of other people see it. I would suggest, based on the, actually, 2 Peter, let's go there, 2 Peter 3:10. So 2 Peter 3:10, you quoted 3:7. The heavens and earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Okay, so notice here in verse 10, the day of the Lord will come as a thief of the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Let's go also to your other passage, which was Revelation 21:1. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. All right. So with those two passages in mind, what I would direct your attention to is that in 2 Peter 3:10, the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. Well, Jesus tells us in Revelation 16, verse 14, it's sandwiched right between Satan, the beast, and the false prophet opening their mouths, and these spirits that look like frogs go out to gather everyone for the battle. And then Jesus says, if you don't watch, I'm going to come like a thief. And then you got the battle of Armageddon, right? So that is the thief of the night moment right there. Is before the battle of Armageddon. Guess what? Here comes Jesus, right? He's coming to fight, and he's giving a warning. You better watch what you're doing, because I'm going to come like a thief in the night. Who is surprised by the thief? The people that aren't expecting him. Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, brethren, you have no need for me to write to you concerning the times and the seasons, for yourselves know that the coming of the Lord happens as a thief in the night. Let's go to that passage. Right? So, the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. Right? Now he says, But you are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. So the new heavens and earth, those occur shortly after the coming of Jesus. I don't know if it's a few minutes, a few days. I don't know exactly how much. I kind of get the sense something like 30 days or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure. So with that in mind, you asked a great question about 2 Peter 3:7. Let's go back to that, because that's really a key passage here. So the heavens and earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. So when does this happen? This day of fire. The day of fire is the second coming of the Lord, which we see right here. Notice the fire until the day of judgment. The day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away. Elements melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Okay. So that is the end of this age. The end of this age is when that happens. Now, there will be yet another resurrection and judgment at the end of the 1,000 years. We're told that in Revelation chapter 20, where John tells us, so Satan is thrown into the abyss, and then we have those who did not take the mark, and they were beheaded. They reigned for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So which one? This one up here in verse 4. This one is the first resurrection. All right, and that happens in conjunction with the return of Jesus. All right, so blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power. All right, so then after all this stuff happens, et cetera, and then we have Satan and his deal, and then we got the great white throne judgment. This is the final judgment. There's going to be a judgment when Jesus comes back, which he tells us in Matthew 25. He says, when the Son of Man comes with his angels in his glory, he will sit on his throne, and he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. So there's going to be a judgment right then. That will be the judgment of those who were wicked during the tribulation and were alive when he comes back. They will be judged right then. And then after the 1,000 years, there will be a final judgment. It's the same judge. It's the same white throne. Jesus is sitting on that white throne. But now it's the judgment of everybody who had died earlier, previously, before the second coming. You know, if they died 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, those people who were the unrighteous dead, they will then be resurrected, and then they will have their day in court. All right, I hope that helps. Very cool. All right, that's great stuff. I've got time for a few more questions. Thank you guys, by the way. Thank you for your donations. I very much do appreciate those. So thank you. All right, let me get to some more questions. Scott, did you get better internet yet? Well, I think so. Comcast tells me it's the best. It should be 600 megabytes down. What more can I do? I figured that would be enough. 600. I don't know. All right, this is Machines of Love and Chaos. Do you think the three unclean spirits that look like frogs mentioned in Revelation are actually alien grays? I think that's a possibility. I do not know what those are, but you know, they could look like alien grays. That's probably a decent resemblance, but I just can't say till it happens. But if it happens that way, that would not surprise me. I wish I could answer more, but we're not given anything more on that. So thank you. Stephen from Liverpool. What is the Lord's Day in Revelation chapter 1? Is it the Shabbat, Sunday, or the millennium, or other? Excellent question. I would argue that it is the Sabbath. Why would I say that? Well, let me take you over to Isaiah chapter 56, where God is talking about keeping his Sabbath. All right. Keep justice, do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who lays hold on it, who keeps from defiling the Sabbath, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Do not let the son of the foreigner, who has joined himself to the Lord, etc. And it's kind of skip down here. He says, for thus says the Lord, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, and choose what pleases me, and hold fast my covenant. Even to them I will give in my house, within my walls, a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. Okay, and he goes on. Also the son of the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, to serve him, to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants. Everyone who keeps from defiling his Sabbaths, hold fast his covenant. All right, so we're really clear that the Sabbath is an important day. All right, I think that's very clear. Now I'm going to go to chapter 58, and God augments this with a bit more here. He talks about fasting, and then he talks about the Sabbath. And he says, if you turn your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day. All right. So, and call the Sabbath a delight. So it's clearly the Sabbath, that is Shabbat, that's Saturday, Friday night to Saturday night, or, the beginning of those evenings. That is the Sabbath. That is God's holy day. So I don't see how it is even remotely possible that John could be saying that I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, which is Sunday. That's nonsense, right? That was not at all the situation in the first century, not even remotely close, right? It just wasn't. That didn't happen. That idea didn't even start until Marcion came along about 136 AD. And he was rabidly anti-Sabbath or anti-Jewish, anti-Torah. And then you start having this distinction of, no, it's not Shabbat, it's not Saturday, it's Sunday. So that process takes a little while, but eventually, it becomes full-fledged Sunday. So per your question, I would argue that John in Revelation chapter 1, when he's in the Lord's day, the Spirit in the Lord's day, it can't be the millennium because he's not in the millennium. He sees the millennium, but he also sees a lot of other things. It's not Sunday because that was never considered to be the Lord's day, but Sabbath, that's the Lord's day. That is God's day. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Question, what's the difference between kosher and then kosher used for Passover? All right, well, so kosher basically means that it doesn't have any, pork product. There's no shellfish, etc. Right. So basically, anything that God said do not eat, then you can, that's considered kosher, right? So, however, kosher for Passover is another thing, because what are we not supposed to have for Passover? We're not supposed to have chametz. Chametz, in a word, is leaven. It's yeast, something that makes something rise. Now, there are differences of opinions on what makes something rise. So I'm not going to get into that because that's a drawn out kind of conversation. But, you'll have to kind of do with what you feel, is kind of comfortable. So legumes, right? Different kinds of beans. They kind of pop a little bit when you cook them. Is that leaven? That's one of those difficult questions. So kosher for Passover means that it does not have any kind of leavening in it, so that it's completely leaven free, right? That's the whole idea. Again, these are questions. What about nachos or nacho chips? If they don't have yeast in them, are they good? A lot of people would say no. Maybe yes. But these are some of the discussions that you have to start looking at. Here's what I would encourage you to do, rather than kind of, pulling your hair out and getting frustrated. Why is it so difficult? Say, this is an amazing opportunity And it's a picture to understand how invasive sin really is, right? Because leaven represents sin. And when you start digging deep into your pantry and saying, well, this thing here, does this have yeast in it? Say, this is a great object lesson for the things in my life. This thing here, does it have sin in it? Or am I just kind of used to it? I've been doing this every day. I watch this particular show, or I say these words, or I have these thoughts. That's when you're supposed to take an inventory and say, I thought these were okay, but now that I'm looking deeper, I realize that my motive for this and that and the other is actually not so pure. So use the challenge of this time, what could be a frustration, channel that into how can I grow? What does this teach me? All right. Very cool. This is from Michelle. What advice do you have for those who are losing faith in the teachings of Paul and are falling away from New Testament and Yeshua? Well, I did a debate on that, so if you can maybe start there, that's probably not the best place. So the thing about Paul is so many people are not rejecting the biblical Paul, but they're rejecting Marcion's version of Paul. And I brought that out in my debate with a guy named Laverne. And so you can check that out. It's on my YouTube channel. I also did a teaching called Haunted Theology, where I dig deep into the teachings of Marcion. And it's scary how insidious and invasive the teachings of Marcion became. So they really became part of mainstream Christian thought. So a lot of people that reject Paul are not rejecting the actual biblical Paul, but they're rejecting Marcion's version of Paul that is frequently taught from the pulpit. That's who they're rejecting. And to get them to see that is difficult. It's very difficult because it's not obvious at all. It's super subtle. But once you have a good idea of what Marcion was teaching, and then you hear some of the things that various pastors are teaching, such as the law was nailed to the cross. That's a real popular one. You realize Paul wasn't saying that. But Marcion's version of Paul says that. The real Paul says we should keep the law. He says it again and again and again. Keep the law. Keeping the commandments of the Lord is what matters. 1 Corinthians 7:19. All right. Because of this grace, do we reject the law? No, we establish it. Romans 3:31. And so many other passages where Paul is establishing the law. So I would say, first of all, be patient with them because they need patience. Secondly, if you could help them to understand, it's not the biblical Paul you're talking about. It's this guy, Marcion's version of Paul, that many people in the church confuse with the real Paul. So they're kind of like Don Quixote. They're fighting windmills instead of actually fighting the real guy. All right. Thank you for that question, Michelle. This is from Gary Allen. 1 Peter 5:13 says, she who is in Babylon, the scripture seems to indicate that whoever she is equal to Peter. Does this indicate a female apostle? What does the Greek say? Who is she? So the she is the diaspora. It's actually the diaspora. That's actually a feminine word. And then it doesn't actually say she in the Greek. It says the Greek word e or a for some, depending on how you want to pronounce your Greek. But I would say e. All right, so that's the Greek eta, and that definite article just means the something feminine, the feminine. So the English translations, they can't do that because we don't have feminine articles in English, so they put the word she in there, but it's not technically she, it's e, and so it's the something feminine, and then you have to say, well, what something feminine is Peter talking about? The word ecclesia does not actually appear in 1 Peter, but the diaspora, that word does appear. And so he's talking about those who are in the diaspora. The diaspora, which is in Babylon, greets you. Babylon and diaspora? Yeah, actually, Babylon was the third most populous Jewish center in the ancient world in the first century. So you have, of course, Jerusalem. And you had number 2 was Alexandria. And number 3 was Babylon. This is where we get the Babylonian Talmud. See, what happened is when Cyrus freed many of the Jews who were in Babylon, many went back, like 35,000, but a whole bunch stayed. Remember the story of Esther, right? A whole bunch of people stayed in the Persian Empire, and they stayed even until the first, second century, somewhere in there, AD. And so Peter's saying, hey, the diaspora in Babylon greets you. That's who it is. So there's no feminine or female apostle that Peter is talking about. Very cool. All right, this is from Gayla Burnett. Colossians 2 states he made a public spectacle, powers and authorities up on the cross. Not just defeat them, but he paraded that defeat through the heavenly realms. The church missed the parade. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening behind the scenes. I'm talking about that in Corrupting the Image 2. I don't have time to go into it because there's a lot of details, but it involves Psalm 68, talking about the mountain of Bashan, which is the mountain of the snake dragon, of course, referring to Satan. We find Bashan and the bulls of Bashan also referenced in Psalm 22, but there were no bulls of Bashan hanging around Jesus, at least not with our eyes that we could see. But in the spiritual realm, there sure were. There were mighty ones, mighty divine, false gods, of course, but they were these demonic fallen angel snake dragons. They were there encircling Jesus, gaping their mouths at him like roaring lions, right? I mean, it's just amazing. And so this was all happening while he's on the cross. Then he goes to Hades, according to 2 Peter chapter 2, and he goes to those who were formerly disobedient, and he proclaims to them, it says preach, but really it's proclaim. It doesn't say exactly what, but he proclaims a victory, and that I now have the keys of Hades and death, not you guys. And yeah, Satan and the boys would not have done that had they known what Jesus was going to do. All right, thank you for that comment/question. All right, this is from Christine. I really want to eat clean, and I'm learning more and more how much pork is in everyday products. Is kosher more rabbinical, or is it biblical? Thank you. That's a great question, Christine. So, part of the kosher thing when it comes from the rabbis, who are obviously the ones doing this, but obviously, not obvious, but sometimes there can be little political quagmires within some of the rabbinic circles, and what can be kosher for one person's rabbi may not be kosher for another person's rabbi, right? That's part of the challenge. So when we say kosher, we're using it really in both ways. We're using it in this rabbinic sense of kosher, but for many of us who are in the Hebrew roots Torah movement, we're talking about biblical kosher, all right? So I kind of keep my eyes and ears open to what the rabbis are saying, but what I consider to be actual legit God's word is what I see in scripture. All right. So, but the rabbis, on the other hand, have a lot of experience. They've invested a lot of time looking into this. So I do consult them and consider their opinion, because I think it's a worthwhile opinion. But the bottom line is that, yeah, pork is out. And you're right, it's in a lot of products. There was a chicken sausage that I was buying for a while, and then I looked at it a little more carefully, or maybe I didn't buy it. I don't know. Anyway, I discovered that it's chicken sausage. I'm like, yes, but it was packed in pork casing. I was like, oh, so I didn't buy it. I don't know if I ever took a bite or something. Well, I don't know. Maybe I did, but I stopped. I didn't get that. And then a couple years later, I went back and I saw that it says contains no pork, and I'm like, all right, and so now it's packed in some chicken casing, and I was like, great, so you're not going to get it 100%. That's probably the bottom line. But I would say do your homework, For example, marshmallows, most, typical supermarket marshmallows have pork in them because they have gelatin, and gelatin quite often comes from pork. So we were able to find some vegan marshmallows. They're not exactly healthy for you, but at least they don't have the pork in them. And so that's what we were considering, so we can still have our s'mores and those kinds of things, but without the pork. So you do have to do your homework. You have to read, and you're probably not going to get it 100%. You're probably going to mess up once in a while. And I'll tell you what to do. Okay. Say, oh, sorry, Lord, I didn't know. Thank you for pointing this out to me. I will try to do better in the future and move on. Okay. Because so much of what God is trying to safeguard us against is our health. We want to be obedient, yes. But why did he give us the commandment in the first place? Because he cares about us. And he knows that pork is not good for us. So, we do whatever we can all the time. We always try to be vigilant about what we're digesting, putting into our bodies. And God told us not to eat pork. So, when you discover something new, just say, I didn't know, Father. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I won't eat that product from now on. Now I'm a little wiser. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much, guys. I'm out of time. I'm so sorry. But keep the questions coming. Tell you what, save it, bookmark it, put it somewhere for next week, and I'll be with you guys again next week. Want to let you know, this is the last time to buy your tickets for Passover. So if you want to join us at the Way Congregation for Passover, please do. We'd love to have you. We have not a lot more availability, but we do have some. Even if you're out of town, you want to come join us, it'd be fantastic to meet you guys, etc. So go to thewaycongregation.com. You can get tickets for it there. We're having to charge because we're not cooking the food ourselves, and there's real cost to this. So we try to keep it affordable as best we can, but we'd love for you to join us. If money is a huge issue, let us know, and we'll find a way to get you tickets for that. So many blessings. God bless you guys. Take care.